Okay, just want to start by saying thank you so much for taking the time out to sit down and chat with me. I
Thanks
suppose
for
we
having me.
should start right at the beginning. So, how did you first discover magic as an art form?
Yeah, I was 6 years old in Denver, Colorado, where I grew up, and I went into this little store called the Wizard's Chest with my grandmother Mimi. So shout out Mimi. And someone showed me a trick called sponge balls, which is where you take a little clown nose, basically. One goes in your hand, one goes in the magician's hand, and then they both appeared in my hand. So that was the first trick I saw, and she bought that for me, and that was a very consequential $7 that she spent because that launched my fascination. But I was yeah, I was sick kid. I was 6 years old, and that was the first time I can at least remember seeing any
Hmm.
magic.
And so, obviously, from that, I suppose it was sort of the kit of how to do it yourself. So, how did you get into do it? How did it become something that you wanted to pursue and sort of spend your life doing?
Yeah, I mean, it happened quite gradually. I started doing it slowly over the years for friends and family. Um, and then by the time I got to high school and college, I started taking it more seriously. I had a mentor for a while growing up. I went to a magic camp when I was in my teenage years. And then the pandemic hit when I was in college, and I started doing virtual magic shows, which a lot of magicians started doing as well, a lot of magic shows on Zoom. And it was interesting because it was my first time getting real reps. Like I probably did 100 Zoom shows.
Hmm.
And so it was my first experience just really consistently sort of gigging. And that was my junior year of college. And then by the time I graduated, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to give this thing a shot. And I moved to New York. And now I'm very lucky to say I do it full time. It's the only real job that I've ever had.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, it was just one of those things that you keep going, you realize, hey, there's a market for this, and here we are.
So from that sort of the sleight of hand stuff of making the balls disappear or duplicate, how did you sort of enter mentalism? Like I've only recently discovered Darren Brown and I attended a show
Sure.
he did in Cardiff. And that was like I there's not something I'd ever sort of been aware of. So how did you
Yeah.
get into that sort of area?
Yeah. I mean, I think as you pursue any passion or hobby or job, you find the different avenues that just
Mhm.
sort of appeal to you and what are you naturally good at. Um, and for me, I'm capable of doing sleight of hand and things like that, but it's not my real passion in the
Hmm.
way that dealing with what's in someone's head is. Um, the stuff that I did growing up in school was like a lot of speech and debate. I did a little bit of theater, not a lot, but
Hmm.
I did stuff that requires talking and conversation. I love to write, and mentalism is a lot like that. It's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of words, and that if done poorly could be boring, but if it's done well, I think can be quite engaging and really draw the audience in and really root them in something real and meaningful. And so for me, I like the fact that even if the content of the show or the overall structure of the show is the same, the actual tricks and what's happening are sort of different because the content changes because the
Hmm.
audience changes every single night. So, if I do a trick where I guess a city that someone's thinking of, that city is going to differ every night depending on who volunteers that
Hmm.
information. So, I think mentalism allows me to really connect with my audience in a way that is incredibly special to me and really roots them in a unique experience every night.
Hmm. I suppose the reactions as well of the audience are different to, say, sleight of hand to mentalism. You know, where you
Yeah,
sleight of hand stuff, they're more like, whoa. Whereas mentalism, like as I said, the Darren Brown show, is just kind of more like, huh? What? Like,
yeah.
how?
I think it can stick with you and resonate with you for a very
Hmm.
long time if you're doing it well.
Hmm. So obviously, one of my questions, and obviously we can cut this out if it's not appropriate. But
Sure.
obviously, as a magician, you come up with your tricks and your performance. How do you weave them together? How does that sort of bit go from I'm going to do this part, this trick? How do you sort of navigate from trick to trick?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I was talking about this with a friend yesterday. In an ideal world, you find motivations for things in the
Hmm.
same way that an actor might be motivated to look a certain direction. So, one example is at the end of my show, I have a routine that ties sort of everything together about how important it is to like slow down and pay attention.
Hmm.
And in order to get into that trick, after I do another one that's a little bit taxing, where like I'm expending a lot of energy, I
Hmm.
go and I grab water, I take a sip of water. And then from that, I have a thought in my head where I'm like, oh, I'm drinking water. A lot of people drink alcohol on stage. I couldn't because of what you just saw. And then that leads me into my next thought. Just the simple
Ah.
act of drinking water. In the same way that a comedian might drink water, right? But it's like, oh, I can actually use this very natural action to motivate what I'm going to do next. So a lot of it is thinking like, how can you have these natural transitions? How how can I have a trick? Something happens in that trick. I can then reference it and then tie that into the next thing.
Ah,
So, if I do a trick that's pretty direct mind reading, um, and then I have something that's about a connection between two strangers, you can reference what you did and then bring it in. So I could say something along the lines of like, so much of what you just saw is about what's happening in my mind, but what's equally interesting to me is what's happening between the two of you, and then you bring them up. And so
ah,
you're really just trying to find these smooth transitions, and it's important
hmm,
because you want the audience to have a pretty seamless experience.
hmm. And
Does that answer the
obviously,
question?
yeah, totally, totally.
Cool.
And obviously, with your style of magic, the audience are heavily involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are brought in and they are part of the performance themselves. So how is
100%.
that sort of audience participation bit? How does that function? How do you get ready? How do you prepare for that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it's interesting because you can only practice
Mm,
in your living room so much. Like the way that you prepared is very similar to a comedian where you can have your idea, but you have to put it in front of an audience to see if it works. And you just never know what a person's going to
mm,
do. I found so many idiosyncrasies in what people do that informs the choices that I make, or even the words that I say, or the instructions that I give someone, because it really is participatory. And so
mm,
the way you do it is you go out and perform for a live audience, and then you critique yourself over and over again. And a lot of it is the art of like giving clear instructions. If I want someone to write something down, you'd be surprised at how many variations they
yeah.
come up with to do that. And so it's just trial and error. And once you've done it a million times, you have a pretty good script and a pretty good idea of what to tell them to do or
Mm,
what not to do. Because, when you're watching a show with audience participation, if there's no dead time, you won't really notice it. But if there is dead time, you absolutely
yeah.
will, if there's some glitch.
Mm,
And so it's important to make that as smooth as possible.
mm. Having done my research on you online, I know that you offer also a course, Crazy Good,
Yeah.
that kind of supports businesses in and sort of presentations and that sort of stuff. So where did that idea come
Hmm.
from?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to doing public performances, I also do a lot of corporate work as well. And a lot of times people want to be like, oh, hey, how can we take what you've learned as a magician and bring this in for our team building experience or something like that? And, one of the fundamental tenets that I try and live by is like that doing something crazy or insane is not actually as crazy as it sounds. And in fact, it can be quite logical
Hmm,
because doing something ridiculous is the only way to set yourself apart in this world, right? You really have to go for it. And you have to go full throttle into as many things as you can. Um, and so I sometimes will go to companies and basically talk about that and talk
hmm,
about how they can apply what they're doing to be as groundbreaking as they possibly can, and just the overall value of living with a mentality of how can I differentiate myself? Is it how can I make it worth it to do the really hard thing? How does that pay off? And
hmm,
magic is a good analogy because magic is so much about going farther than the audience might think that you would, and surprising them in really surprising or surprising them in really unique ways.
hmm,
So I try and talk to companies about that whenever they'll have me.
hmm. And sort of one of the big things on Crazy Good is the ability to remember 100 names.
Yeah,
And I read a bit about have as you said, using a magic trick to kind of get attention and stand yourself out. Have you had
sure.
backlash from sort of other magicians that you kind of giving away tricks, you kind of offering off secrets that, magicians are known for keeping their secrets to their chest. Have you had
Yeah.
any backlash?
Luckily, no. The memorizing name things is not a secret. It's a
Yeah.
stunt more than anything. It can feel quite magical, but it's not secret. I mean, I
Mm,
could teach anyone. There's a million books written about it. You can Google it.
mm,
I mean, it's the way you memorize a name is the way you memorize anything, which is that you create a mnemonic and then
got
you associate that with a face or what they're wearing. Or if I was seeing you, I might think of a black and white cookie because your shirt kind of looks like
mm,
that, right? So that's how you would do it. Um, I put that in the context of how do you do that in a show or something like
mm,
that. And then as far as magic tricks, there's a pretty big difference between teaching and exposure. And in the same way that, The Great Gatsby is in the public domain, there are tricks that are simple and fundamental enough that those are essentially in the public domain as well,
mm,
where they're not particularly owned by any one person, or they might be 100, 200 years old. So they're fundamental tenets that really are okay to
mm,
teach. I'm not going and exposing another magician's,
mm.
prime trick, which would be very unethical. I'm doing stuff that is in the public domain that could be Googled or found on YouTube or something like that to usually teach a very simple concept that someone in a company or a private event might be able
Hmm.
to apply, but not in a way that's going to get any backlash, I hope.
Yeah. So you're not like you're not obviously you're not training magicians. You are just giving people tools to be more magical, I suppose would be a nice way.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Or just even learning how to present a magic trick, I think is a really interesting experience, and it's pretty rare. We don't get to learn that a lot, and there's a lot of nuance in it. And so, a lot of times companies will just appreciate that logic of like, oh, why are you looking here and not here? Why are you
Hmm.
saying one specific sentence or even one specific word to anchor a memory in somebody's mind? There's so much that you can talk about there, and
Ah.
so those are the interesting things that people like to grab onto.
Mm. So obviously we're here to talk about Strangers and Friends, the show that you've got coming up.
Yeah.
So where did that come from? Where did the name come from first? Where does the title come from?
Yeah, so the main show is called Strangers. Strangers and Friends is this like tiny little offshoot I do in Denver where I sometimes have some
Ah.
comedians involved, but same deal. But yeah, the main show I'm doing in Edinburgh is called Strangers. Um, the name came, I mean, I think I did it for like some random little offshoot of this like 2 years ago. Um, but it's interesting to me because the show is full of strangers. That's how every single show
Hmm.
starts, but by the end we do leave knowing each other, and I think that's really interesting because I want people to go into the show knowing that it's about them. Like, yes, I'm the one performing it, but
Hmm.
ultimately without the audience there is no show. Every single thing that I do is interactive. Every single thing that I do involves the audience, and I think it's very interesting that as a magician, when I'm on stage, I can play a sort of godlike figure where I know a lot of things about people. But in real life, I'm just as clueless as the next guy. And I think it's a really interesting
Hmm.
dichotomy. And I like to talk about on stage how we are strangers to each other. We are often strangers to ourselves, but that it is an incredibly valuable experience to slow down and learn something about each other. And so, hopefully, in the
Hmm.
process of being in this show, we actually do learn legitimate things about each other, whether it's their something as simple as their name or a preference or something that they like or a vacation that they went on. Um, and by the end, we leave more as one unit than we started with.
Ah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So for those who have
Yeah.
not seen you perform before, what can people expect from Strangers?
So they can expect a super interactive show, not in a way that's going to embarrass you or put someone on stage the entire time. But by super interactive, I just mean like someone's making a decision for
Hmm.
every trick, even if it's as simple as calling on someone and asking them to name something. So it's interactive to the extent that you know that that night is going to be totally different from any other show that happens. And there's also storytelling involved. It's important to me that people learn about the performer, which is in this case me, and there are stories woven through the show that hopefully give people a broader experience of things in my life and things in
Hmm.
their life as well. And um, there's an overall theme that's running through all the other tricks about the importance of slowing down and what happens when we do that as a group and pay attention to one another.
Mm. So obviously, in your show, you are the only person on stage. You are the solo performer. So does that kind of add pressure to you?
It does in both a good way and maybe a more difficult way. Um, Last year at Edinburgh Fringe, I performed with my really good friend Tess, who's a fantastic comedian, and it was both of our first fringes. So I think we really enjoyed having each other there to
Hmm.
support each other. Like I was stoked that I was not the only person on stage and that I had someone else to produce with and perform with, and that was wonderful. But I also really enjoy being a solo performer, and I think that after prepping for it for a year, I'm now better equipped to go do my solo show. And now that I've been touring around the States with it as well, it's just given me a really good perspective on like, oh, doing this by yourself absolutely is harder,
Hmm.
but you learn so much and you really do get better at it because you're really trying to go out there and do the full show without being able to reset yourself mentally. I think that's the big change is that when I'm doing it with another performer like Tess and we were going on and off stage, if something was a little off, if the audience was off, if I was off, whatever, I can go off stage, I can reset my mind.
Hmm.
When I'm on stage the entire show, it means that any of those adjustments need to be made while I'm on stage and while I'm still performing. So I've learned to just build in little moments to reset. I literally have a video that plays during the show. One of the purposes is to give the audience a break and just let them watch a video for a minute.
Hmm.
And the other purpose is to give me a break and let me go backstage, get a drink of water, come out
Hmm.
there fully fresh. So I mean, it does add pressure, but I also think it's really fun and really gratifying to get to do the whole thing and really connect
Hmm.
with the audience for that whole time.
You also mentioned obviously that every show is slightly different in that you don't
Hmm.
you well, I mean, you have more of an idea, but you can't guarantee the
Yeah,
same people are going to say the same thing, or so it's going to
yeah.
be slightly different every time. So does that add pressure to you as a sort of doing a long stretch of shows?
It definitely does. It's not like I mean, every performance is hard, but like a play,
Hmm.
you're gonna have a pretty good idea how that's gonna go because in theory, it's identical each time.
Yeah.
That's the point. Whereas for me, the point actually is not for it to be identical. Um, However, you do find after doing a large volume of performances a general structure that you can
Hmm.
fill into, and once you're precise enough with your language to give the audience instructions, people will fall into a general
Hmm.
mold, or their reactions will be in a certain variable range for most of the time. So as much as it adds pressure, for me it almost just adds excitement, where
Hmm.
it's like, oh, I'm not doing the same thing. It's legitimately going to be different. I'm going to have to climb this mountain again, and it keeps me present, because if it was identical every night, you risk going on autopilot. But because I'm really meeting people every single time, and really trying to meet them where they're at, like, I do have to adapt, and I do have to be live, and I'm not on autopilot, which is
Yeah.
great because I want the audience to have my full attention.
Obviously you talked about that excitement. I've not been to the Edinburgh Fringe before, but I have heard stories of how grand and frantic it can be. But obviously
Yeah,
you're not doing it for the first time. You are returning to the Fringe. So
yeah,
does that kind of I know you talked about it being a solo show this time, but does that add pressure having the call back of you're going to be coming back again to do a show?
totally, totally. I mean, I think it's I forget who said it. Pressure is a privilege, right?
Hmm.
Like, it's awesome. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, your job as a performer is to get better every time, and to
Mhm.
give audiences more and more and more if you can. And so, I think luckily the pressure is mostly just coming from me. I think a lot of times, and especially in Edinburgh, I'm relatively unknown, and I don't have the same kind of audience there that I do in the United States. So, in a way, it's cool. I get to come in as a relatively unknown performer and hopefully build a big audience this time. But hopefully, the pressure just coming on my side, and I
Hmm.
get to put that on myself in a healthy way, to just say, like, yes, like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna spend a lot of time and a lot of effort over,
Hmm.
in there for a month. So let's make it good.
Yeah, hopefully I'll bump into you when I'm up there. Obviously, I'm really
Yeah.
excited to see your show. I've already added to my sort of short list of things I want to
Oh,
see,
I'm so glad.
so which is exciting. So we are coming to the end of my questions, but I have a couple
Yeah.
more. So for those who haven't seen you perform before and are interested in Strangers, what can they expect, and why should they come see the show?
Yeah. So I think what they can expect is a lot of very direct mentalism and mind reading.
Mhm.
So if you've seen a lot of magic shows, but you haven't seen a lot of ones that are really about the audience, then you can absolutely expect that. You're going to have some storytelling as well, so that there's going to be this other dimension that's not just the magic. And the goal, and what's been happening at the shows in the United States, is that people feel pretty warm and joyful afterwards. This isn't a
Hmm.
show that's going to bring you down. I think it's a show that's really going to uplift the audience, and give you a good feeling. And one of my favorite parts about magic is that it really breaks the mold of our day-to-day lives. They can be so predictable, and that's fine. That's how oftentimes we want them to be with our jobs or our families. Predictability is often very good. But what we lose in that is some spontaneity and some random acts of joy and kindness. And I really hope that in the show that people are experiencing that I really do care about them. I care about their experience. I care that they walk away experiencing novelty and surprise. So I can, as much as you can guarantee a surprise, I think I can pretty much
Hmm.
guarantee a lot of surprise. So if you come, you'll absolutely experience that, and some cool memory stunts as well. I'll
Hmm.
be learning a lot of names.
So to ignore the sort of, I suppose, overused phrase, but it's to inject a bit of magic into people's lives.
100%. I mean, it's cliche, but it's absolutely true.
Hmm. So where can people stay up to date with you and the show?
Yeah, so I post all of my dates on my website, maxdavidsonmagic.com. I've every single thing. If there's a get tickets button, you can get tickets to every single show that I do, whether it's in the States. The Edinburgh Fringe shows are already on my website. And I post slightly more frequent updates on my Instagram, which is also Max Davidson Magic. So I try and keep it as simple as I can. Those are the two channels you can follow me on.
Fabulous. I'll put the links below so people can scroll down and click away. Um,
Perfect.
my final question is, what advice do you have for young magicians looking to get where you are?
Oh man, to genuinely just do it. It's
Hmm.
so simple, but it's so true. Is I made mine. I mean, I still have a long way to go, but I've made the name for myself in New York that I have by just getting out there and producing a lot of public shows.
Mhm.
And the the way to get good at magic is to just do magic as much as possible in whatever capacity it is. If it's corporate events or private events or public shows, put them on. The money will come later.
Hmm.
Success is a byproduct of hard work. Um, just literally do it as much as humanly possible, and everything will follow. Truly.
Fantastic. So as I said at the beginning, as I said earlier, I'll put all the links in the comments below so people can scroll down and click away. And
Great.
I started with it, but I'll end the same way. Thank you so much for taking the time out to sit down and chat with me. I wish you the best of luck, and I hope to bump into you in Edinburgh.
I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Speak to you soon.